Welcome to Delivered. We're delivering mothers, midwives, and magic. And today we are talking about pathways to midwifery. I'm Jasmine.
I'm Erica. I'm Sherry.
We're talking about pathways to midwifery. There are so many different pathways to take, right? There's so many different types of midwives. And so today we'll be talking about the different training that goes into it and how someone might attain that training, a lot of which is not always available. So answering questions and just different topics on maternity and what midwifery is all about. Yeah.
I love that. And I think when we're talking about midwifery, like I was thinking as we were saying and talking about bias, something that I think we'll cover in a future episode. But in the field of obstetrics, you just look for OB. Sometimes you see a DO, sometimes you see MD, but for the most part, like physicians, there's like those two pathways really.
Right.
A DO is supposed to be more holistic minded. That
Mhm.
hasn't been really what we've experienced here in the Valley per se. I hope we keep all those pathways open, but we certainly want to go through, we'll divulge our biases and share because I know we get called a lot actually, huh? People emailing saying, I'm interested in doing this. They don't even know anything about our certifying body. Like
Yeah.
most people don't know. Like for us as midwives, we're very familiar with the North American Registry of Midwives, but like the
But also, not
regular
all of
human
us are a
doesn't.
part of the North American Registry
Exactly.
of Midwives.
Right.
Some of us
Yeah.
choose not to become a part of that. And those are certified professional midwives.
Yeah.
And NARM is really great. They could improve.
They were the beginning.
They were in the
they
beginning.
were like,
Yeah.
they
I'm
were,
trying to be diplomatic.
you're so
I'm
great.
trying to be diplomatic.
Right.
What I love though is that there are more certifying bodies because
Yes.
from what I've heard, NARM does not represent everyone. So I think that's becoming or has been an issue and people are trying to
I-
combat. So I love that.
I have a certification outline that's written out that's different but similar to NARM. It's different insofar as like
Any profession you enter, there's usually more than one agency. There's more than one choice of school. Like we have MEEC accredited schools, period. But like the governing bodies and how that gets answered to, and we'll go through that in the future in the video. So just like for us, midwifery, we're going to talk about all those different pathways, but midwifery, what's great about it right now is it's still super attainable, accessible in some states. And so I think that's where we start, right? Let's start talking about the legality piece. So let's start by talking about legislation in the states. I have a lot of clients that I deliver their babies and then they move and then they go, oh, I want you to come deliver my baby in the state that I live in. And I've considered that, right? But there are some states that if you don't have a license, you can't practice midwifery. In fact, the majority of states, you have to have a license in order
and
to
some
be a
it's
midwife.
downright illegal. You cannot. The state legislature, the state governing body is saying you cannot have your baby at home. It is against the law,
Yeah.
which is mind-boggling to me. And I happen to know the state that pops up into my mind in forefront is actually Nebraska, because I've had not one but two clients. One came back here from Nebraska to have her baby with me. The other one decided not to move to Nebraska because it's against the law to have a home birth. Like they will, and they prosecute. Like New York
Yeah.
State will prosecute. If you're not a licensed midwife in New York State, they will prosecute and put you in jail.
We covered in our last video that Nevada is illegal, whatever that means. And so they just say that we're not in the practice of medicine. And so there isn't really a requirement, but most states have a requirement. So let's talk about the highest. Let's go to the most recognized midwife in the field of obstetrics would be, I think, a CNM.
Yep.
CNN.
Absolutely.
And so they are members of the American College of Nurse Midwives, and they are advanced practice. So they are able to do some small kind of surgeries and prescribe medications. They can get hospital privileges. Now in our state, you have to be under the direction of a physician, but that's just because we're behind the times. So all of our CNMs in this valley work with physicians that I'm aware of. At the birth center, they have CNMs there. And so CNMs in our state can practice home or hospital, depending on what their privileges are. And they go and they get a master's and they have to go to a school
You're going to university to get your master's in midwifery. So,
But there's only a handful of
yeah, there's only a few of them
schools.
who do that because it's very expensive. But also, the MEEC schools are expensive too.
You'll have people move into the nursing career, which is huge. We've had actually like 4 midwives that I'm aware of off the top of my head go from being a home birth midwife and entering that nursing just to have that kind of stability of life, I think. They have as much schooling as a physician. Like they put in the time, they do the work, they do clinicals, just like somebody who's in med school, and they have those extra abilities. And it's nice in this state that they have more autonomy than other places. It's a bummer that a physician has to sign off on the hospital piece, but I do like that. And that is a big commitment. That is literally going to college.
You're going to grad school to get your master's in midwifery.
Oh, you have to look at the state you live in, right? You have to look at the states you live in and see what their laws are on the different things, because in this state, that's just what the laws are here. So you can hire and they can do that here, which is a great option. Jasmine, do you feel like you could tackle the CPM piece?
Sure.
Yeah.
So,
You're going through it.
yeah, I am actively going
Yeah.
right now. And I love the CPM piece because there's not just this one way to go. Whereas with the nurse midwife route, like you said, you have to do nursing school. They are nurses for a long time. They're RNs for a long time. And then they take the midwifery piece and they do that.
I have an insert.
Okay.
Don't lose your thought.
I won't.
There is a CM qualifications
Certified
through
midwife.
ACNM, which does remove some of the precursors for some humans that may not have their master's degree. There is a CM thing that a lot of midwives are pushing for, but it's not super popular. But I do want to mention that really quick. There is 2 options. You can go through the CM process or the CNM. You didn't have to necessarily be a nurse first. I think you have like prereqs that kind of get
And I
you into
think
the
you
program.
you can get in several states. Like I know
They're
in New
trying to
York
make it
they're
more
trying to do
accessible.
that.
Okay.
They're trying to make it more accessible because your CNM takes so long, but it's not widely accepted yet. That's why we don't hear about it as much. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
But that's accessibility. That's what I love about the CPM route. You have the PEP process, which is an apprenticeship type of process where you get with a preceptor, shares my preceptor, and you shadow and do clinicals as well as the education piece. And here at Well-Rounded Mama, we do Sister Circle. We come together and have assignments and are getting this practice around what it looks like to be a midwife. So that's the education piece. And then after, you have a pretty lengthy packet to work with where you have to get a certain number of clinicals in, postpartum visits, as well as these like newborn exams. So actively like on the job training is what I would call the PEP process. And I'm loving it, right? And then there's the MEEC side where you do, how long is it though?
The whole learn process is 2 years.
It's about 2 years. Okay. So for that, you take classes, like actively going to classes, like at a school, at a MEEC accredited college.
And I think you have up to 5 years to complete it. I can't remember.
For the CPM or
for CPM.
It just changed to 5 years. Yeah. But for the MEEC accredited side, you're going to a MEEC accredited school and is Midwifery Education Accreditation Council.
So many people are going to
Cool. We're giving you guys so much education. And after you have this education, you can go and do clinicals and work with the preceptors. It's more of a school base. And that's great. I love it because I love the option of having both, because some people are great in a classroom. Some people just aren't. And then also the accessibility piece with the PEP process is that some people can't afford school, right? And that's just everyone has just they have different situations. So there's two different
time
processes.
too, right?
Time.
Because if you're in a MEEC credit school, sometimes that's hard to also have a job because a lot of humans still have bills to pay.
Yeah.
And so sometimes the time piece, not just the money piece, but that you have to show up at school might keep you from making money to pay your bills. So I think that piece too.
That piece of accessibility too.
Potentially.
Yeah. I think there's lots to think about in either pathway when we're talking about the MEEC accredited side or the PEP process, because you get to choose someone to work with. There's always thinking about who you are a good fit with and who you want to learn from. And then I think going through this, you get to take like, how do I want to be a midwife? And learning from someone, you get to decide what you want to keep, what you want to toss. And so you have this variety and this piece of making it your own, which you do, I think, in any practice. After you have all these clinicals, you have this thick packet filled out of clinicals that you've done, of births that you've attended, newborn exams that you've done. You get to sit for this NARM test. That would make you a certified professional midwife or CPM.
Thanks. And so I'm going to expand on that as a preceptor for NARM, what that looks like. And then I'm going to turn the time over to Erica to discuss why you would choose not to. For me, when I moved here, CPM wasn't like super popular, but the reason why I wanted to do is I knew I wanted to train other midwives, but I needed the certification piece just for my own accountability. And so it wasn't that I thought like the CPM elevated or made something better. It just was like a basic understanding. If I pass this test, I at least know the basic whatever. And that was me. That was like what I needed, which I like that piece because it wasn't that the state was telling me or someone else was telling me. I knew what I needed to be the best midwife. And I knew, even though I could be capable of self-study and attending the deliveries and stuff, I needed something to push me to make sure I was covering all the areas I needed to pass this exam and this test. I've trained a lot of midwives over the year, and that's why I hang on to my CPM piece. It works with a lot of different insurance companies. That's something to consider. And so the CPM, if you want to get into insurance, then having some kind of credential sometimes helps. There are benefits if you want there to be some level of self-accountability. Somebody's formatted your education. You can be as book smart as you want, but if in the field
Right.
you can't do what needs to get done, it's just not a good fit. And so until you see it. And so an example I'll give before I turn the time over to Erica would be like, I remember shoulder dystocia, right? That's everyone is so worried about big babies and shoulder dystocia, although statistically it's small babies that have shoulder dystocia, but okay. I had taken all these classes. I paid for all these trainings for shoulder dystocia. You prepared and you run it through. We do practice drills with the students where we all sit with the dummy and we practice what do we do in the case of a dystocia. And then when I'm in the field and I had my first dystocia, it didn't feel like I could describe how that went down, right? Because until you did it, you didn't grasp
It's different
it.
when you're really
I
doing
understood it in the
Sure.
books. But I remember them going in and being like, you're just going to take your 2 fingers, you're going to jiggle the shoulders out. Yeah. Okay. Nah. Like, I'm going to write that. I'm going to write that because come on, you just shimmy the shoulders. Nah, man.
That's never worked for
Your
me
arm is
personally,
like up
but
in this human, like up to here. And you're like, it's just like a process, right? But I understood the mechanics of it and the physiology behind it and what was happening. But until I actually was put in a position to do it, and this is why the apprenticeship model works so well, because you have to, even though you do clinicals at a MEEC accredited school, you really need a preceptor. You really need someone so that when you're experiencing that for the first time, you have somebody there to be your backup. For me, back when I passed my PEP, it was a 1-year apprenticeship. And I was taking clients like 8 months in. And so doing that stuff under your preceptor,
it builds your
it is what it
self-confidence.
is. To have your
Builds your
preceptor
self-confidence.
walking you through something or talking you through something or seeing something. I like that apprenticeship model because I think it's important. Now, the MEEC accredited school is fine, but so long as you're doing it because that's your learning style and that's what you need. Don't politicize. Your option would be my one piece of advice. Don't make it about the politics behind it, that you think if you go to MEEC accredited school, you'll be more respected by community. In my humble opinion and experience, there's actually no amount of training that you could possibly do as a midwife where you would be accepted amongst the medical model. So even though the medical model can go, here's the hoops we want you to jump through, do it for you. Do it for your clients. Do it if you happen to live in a state that requires it. But don't do it because you're feeding some idea that if you don't do it this way or that way, that you won't get what you need. So go by what you feel. That would be my 2 cents. I have a CPM because I wanted to be involved in several of the things that the project did, and I wanted to improve on it. I don't know if I'll hold on to my CPM. I will long enough to get Jasmine through the program, but I do think, like you said, it's changing a little bit. There are so many Facebook groups for student midwives, whether you're planning on being a CPM or not. join Facebook groups with student midwives, talk to others about what they're doing, and get a feedback about climate, because we are speaking about Nevada climate specifically. Some of us might know some things about the surrounding states that we're in. I have a license in Arizona because if I got caught delivering a baby there, I'd get in trouble. For years, I didn't need one there and it didn't matter. Now it does. And so you just have to go. And I do want to deliver babies there. Utah's still voluntary. So I could deliver in Utah and it be voluntary. But in Arizona, it changed. So I did it because I do want to accommodate my clients. I'm choosing to do that. Will I always do that? I don't know. And so that's why we're going to turn over, like, why did the CPM not work for everybody? And how can you embrace your education without going down that pathway? Tell you, really.
I love your advice about being in these different groups, because I'm in a couple of Facebook groups. And one thing that, like, the conversation that has been is CPM over CNM, or vice versa. What's your experience? Were you a CPM at first and now you've moved to a CNM? What and why? I've seen that question so much, and there's a lot of different reasons that people list. Getting this different insight from people, and not just in Nevada, in different states as well. That's been super helpful for me as a student to go and just get different people's experience and see what they're going through too.
Nice.
Okay, you can go now.
So
Good job, Jasmine. Good job.
I did go through the PEP process. I did all my phases. I turned them all in. I think at the time when I turned them in, I think I was the only student who got audited every single phase.
I got audited too.
Including phase 1. Which
Observation.
I know, right? Unheard of. NARM audited
They
my
just
phase
didn't believe
1.
I went to that many births.
After all of that nonsense, and I did take the test, and I took the test, I think, twice, and both times I missed it by 3 or 4 points.
Oh, Erica, that's so brave of you to share that.
Thank you.
Because it's so scary.
It is
I
scary.
didn't
It's
pass
terrifying.
it. I passed it the second time because I'm an overthinker and a bad test taker.
Oh, I'm a
And I
terrible
think
test
that's
taker.
something that's
I'm a
so
terrible test
important
taker.
to address. Yeah.
And when I was in high school, I took my SATs orally and untimed. And I took them with another girl. She and I were able to take our SATs orally and untimed. And I say this because NARM is a standardized test. That NARM test, it is a standardized test. And my scores on my SATs that I took untimed and orally were exponentially higher than my timed written test.
Yeah.
But doesn't NARM have accommodations though?
Yes, but you have to be able to prove those accommodations.
But it used
So
to
you
be,
have to jump
you had
through
to
hoops.
travel to test.
Yes.
There was very
Yeah,
select
you had to
places. So
travel.
when
It's
I did
online
it,
now.
now,
Online.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the testing centers.
but there's a
Trop and
testing
like
center.
Something.
Yeah.
Trop and
So they
Pecos. It's
use,
a Trop and Pecos.
yeah, they
Yep.
use one of the testing centers. I had to travel to Utah to take my test
Mhm.
because they only hosted them certain times of the
It
year.
was twice a year.
Oh,
so.
I think it was in the spring and in
So
the
you had to
fall.
wait.
Uh-huh.
And
Yeah.
so, and that was like a mistake for me because, oh my gosh, by the time I got to sit for the exam, I wasn't even thinking about studying. I was busy in a practice.
I think the test, by the time I took the test, I had been a practicing midwife. And
Yeah.
in all honesty, a lot of the questions on the test, I totally overthought, only because I've been in a
The
situation.
legality
You
too.
brought up shoulder dystocia, and they have questions about that on the NARM.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting here thinking, honestly, I wouldn't do any of the choices of the answers that they gave me. That was a hard thing for me. I took it twice. I didn't pass. I was devastated.
Yeah.
I didn't get out of bed or leave my
Oh.
house for probably a week after each time I took that test. And again, I do feel like for a really long time, I suffered from imposter syndrome because I was in this valley where your worth, I feel, was put on those stupid initials after your name. But I soon realized that there were women who were practicing who were CPMs and CNMs, and I wouldn't trust them to birth my puppies. They knew all of this book stuff, but there was no practical knowledge to it. Yeah. I think when Ina May Gaskin first started North American Registry of Midwives and the farm
And
and
I think there were several people who did it.
all of
there,
that,
too. I think
all of
some
those
them
women, I
did it,
think,
yeah.
I think their intentions were really great.
They hadn't have a choice. They had to fight for it.
They had
at
to
the
fight for
time.
everything. But I think now there is a true resurgence in traditional midwifery, meaning that you find a preceptor and you go to births and prenatals and postpartums and newborn exams with that preceptor, and you learn how to be a midwife with that person. Now, that doesn't mean you don't do the book work, you don't take the training.
Right.
I can tell you, I started taking NRP, neonatal resuscitation, when I was a doula. And it wasn't something I was ever going to use as a doula, but it gave me the knowledge so that if I was at a home birth with a midwife and they needed help, holy cow,
You know what
I
to
could
do.
help. I knew what to do. So I think it's important to state that just because a midwife doesn't have all of those alphabet letters behind her name doesn't mean that she is not a skilled and trained midwife and an experienced midwife. Because Sherry was saying, you can take all of that book learning, and that's great. But applying it to an actual situation, it's like comparing a grape and a watermelon.
Yeah.
Because I remember my first placental abruption. And I remember thinking, I have to get this woman out of the tub and we have to get a baby out, or I could have a dead baby. It was an act, but nothing in holistic midwifery is going to teach you that. Nothing in Miles is going to teach you that. Nothing in Varney's is going to teach you that. You have to be able to do it yourself. You have to be able, I'm going to quote Karen Strange right now, feel yourself on the floor, ground yourself. And focus, you have to focus on the task at hand, because the reality is whether you are a CPM or a DEM or a lay midwife or whatever you want to call us home birth midwives, when it's your client, it's all right here. So I don't care how many books you've read. If you can't work in the actual practical situation, all that book reading doesn't mean anything.
Sure. That's why it's such a good marriage, right? I think that's the beautiful part about traditional midwifery for me, is that when you feel called, then the right people show up in your life, and then you get that training and you get to step into that piece. It's terrifying. And I'm in my 50s now. And the fact that I'm like nervous about this new skill that I'm learning and to apply it, there are a lot of skills that I get where I go, ooh, like there's a first time, like how many times do my students call me when they get to take their first tear? They're like, Sherry, can you come suture this human of mine? And I'm like, no, but I can come watch you. Because you're going to have to do it. At some point, you just got to do it. And I think the first time I ever gave someone a shot was Kim Trower. We were practicing and just giving each other vitamin B shots.
Oh, how funny.
And I was going so slow. I was
like, just do it already.
oh my gosh, you're causing me so much
stress.
anxiety,
Yeah,
and
just do
it
it.
hurts more. And it wasn't like you can practice on an orange all day long.
Oh, it's different.
But until you go to do it on someone, it's different.
Different.
And so I think that's a beautiful piece.
And that's really good to point out the practice thing, because this is just as an aside thing. I was on the phone the other day with a friend of mine, and she was like, what are you doing? I said, do you really want to know?
Oh, yeah.
And she's, yeah, it's like, I'm practicing suturing. And she's, I'm sorry, you're what? I said, I have my little model out, and I will say beef tongue is way better to practice suturing on than my little model. But I had my little model out, and I was like, yeah, I'm practicing like my subcutaneous suturing and then my over suturing to really close up a tear. And she's, okay, I just think that's really weird, but I have to say, I love the fact that you're practicing, because I may not be your client, but I think your clients would love to know that, oh, I'm just sitting at home. Oh, I think I'm just going to practice suturing.
If you don't use it, you lose it.
Yes, if you don't use it, you lose it.
You always have to be a little bit in. And that's why NARM does you have to actively take like a certain amount of client.
I think that any practicing midwife, I don't care if you're a CPM, CNM, DEM, whatever you are, I think you need to take those classes. And I know that we have a handful of midwives here that don't participate in neonatal resuscitation. And that to me is a huge disservice to their clients, because what happens if they have a baby that needs some help? And again, I'm going to quote Karen Strange. I get something out of her class every time she gives it and every time I take it. But the last time she was here, it was the should you or shouldn't you? And that really stuck with me and resonated with me because it
Baby's
was
not
like,
the
you should. If
Yeah.
it's a choice, you always should, because you're never going to hurt a baby by giving some puffs. You're never going to hurt the baby. It's only going to help.
Yeah.
And I think that's important. You have to know what's going on. We're talking about how can you be a student midwife and not know how to do newborn screenings? You have to be able to poke a baby.
Yeah.
And look, it's a sucky thing to do.
Yeah.
Nobody likes doing it. I want you to poke the baby.
Yeah.
You have to live in a state that, thankfully, we do. But how can you? That's something that you should just know how
Well,
to
you
do.
have to practice and you have to do
Yeah.
drills because it has to become I
Second
think with
nature.
any skill. You
Yes.
have to do the work. I also was thinking the important piece to remember about midwives is you have your nurse midwives or your certified midwives. That is one pathway. And the truth is, the rest is the same. So even though Erica doesn't have CPM after her name, she's a direct entry midwife. I am also a direct entry midwife.
And I think that gets lost. People don't understand that. If you were to
Lay midwife.
you were to talk to
I'm
a
also a
CP,
lay
like
midwife.
some CPMs, like, oh, I'm a CPM. Oh, sweetie, you're a direct entry midwife. I said this on our last episode. Midwives have been around since the beginning of time because humans have been having babies since the beginning of time.
Sure. I think it just started out with women supporting women. That's what it was. Like you called over
So I
somebody.
keep looking
and
at
you
your
had
book, the first
experience.
40 days.
Yeah, you just took
That's
care of and loved
like,
on.
yeah.
And then you develop those skills and the knowledge to care. And I think most of us have extend that right into nutrition or health or something that you bring to the
Homeopathic,
table so that you can reach these
herbs.
families.
Yep.
But I think if you're going to be a midwife, you're either going to go to a college and get your master's degree, or you're going to go through the direct entry piece. And why I think the direct entry piece is so great is you can manage and moderate your own schedule. So if you are raising a family, like I know a lot of humans were like, oh my gosh, don't do this when you have young children. But if you find the right preceptor and you set goals for yourself. And so what I always tell my students is let's have a 5-year plan. If we can get it done in 2.5, great. But let's go in with a 5-year plan because it's a lifestyle where you're on call and you're learning skills and you're having conversations. Maybe you have a prenatal and that now I'm going to call another midwife. Maybe I call Cora and say, hey, I just had this visit. I'm seeing this happen. Do you have thoughts? Because a second set of eyes is always really important. And so calling any midwife, whether it's a CNM or a direct entry, I think that's where the community piece comes in. So that's what I guess I would like to end with is as a community midwife, it's all about serving your community. And how much of that, I guess that would be the argumentative piece. How much of that is not practice of medicine and how much is? How much should be regulated? How much shouldn't be? Should there be a licensure? Should there be a set of standards?
Yes.
But you would have to trust that governing body. And I think right now there's a lot of distrust in the world generally. So trusting a certifying body or agency or educational facility to hold you, because Jasmine's even had where there was rumors that the CPM was going to go away.
It's just another way for the powers that be to have control over our choices.
I love that you're putting that in quotes because when I think about certification of any profession, even as a doula, right? Who's in charge? And do we trust these people who are in charge?
We
who are
agree with it
saying,
or align with it.
this is what's right. This is what you should know. This is what you should do. This is what you shouldn't do. Do we trust that? Are we okay with that? And should we be building up our own systems that serve the communities that we want to serve?
Because
Or
when
not?
you read like their code of ethics or their belief systems, I imagine when any human reads them, there's got to be some there you don't agree with or don't align with you, but you don't have another certifying body. You don't have another agency.
That's why I want to start one.
to tell you I am who I am, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's hard because I hear both stories. I see both sides, and I don't know what the answer is outside of I would protect
Because
birth
there's no
options
easy
for my-
answer. There's no easy answer.
But would you agree that anything that removes a birthing option for
Is not good.
a human is bad?
It's
So
bad.
the
It's not
moment you have them coming in and saying you're removing their right, like what? Oh my gosh, what's that thing that's going on about that Indigenous mom right now? Is she in Canada? Denmark, Norway, somewhere where it's cold. but she's lost her baby because they do these evaluations of what they expect of what you can
Milestone.
find in your system, what you can find in your her
okay.
pregnancy. They took it before her baby before she even left the hospital. And so I think parents are losing their autonomy. And I remember someone saying this the first time we called a peer review, and it was done at our location up in Pebble.
Mhm.
Do you remember that? And all the midwives came together for this family that had a lot. Do you remember?
Yes, I do.
And it was interesting because I even felt like, yeah, I can meet in the middle somewhere on these standards. And you start going down those standards, you go, okay, so what would a midwife have to know for me to sign off and say,
I
and
think that
has
can be
changed for me.
subjective. I
That's
think that can
changed
be
for me.
yeah.
I don't feel like the same woman because I remember at the time Maggie going, anyone should be able to deliver the baby. I go, there should be a standard. And she'd be like, anyone. And now I think I do align more with that kind of theory, not saying right, wrong, or whatever.
Not right, not wrong.
I'm just saying the state
stating
overstepped.
it,
So I don't
right.
trust the state to certify me, but I also want to work within a system where I become accessible. So state insurance,
Because the
maybe.
state has, I really feel like there's an ulterior motive there for control. And I guess that's really what we're talking about is like the control of outside bodies governing what we can do with our bodies, what we can do with our babies.
Because before the CPM was big in this valley, and I'll own a little bit of that, but all the midwives said, if you attend 100 deliveries, you're fine to be a midwife. And I would say after 100 deliveries, a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Are there gaps and holes
Mhm.
and stuff in that knowledge? But I'm sorry, if you've attended 100 deliveries, you know a hell of a lot about birth. What normal looks like,
Mhm.
what not normal looks like. You've seen things that worked, you've seen things that didn't work. And so our community as a whole accepted new midwives under this very basic umbrella of if you put in the work, we're just going to assume you're a good person. You make great choices. But the truth is we can't, right? We've even had a CPM come in and destroy Nevada's name. And she was a CPM.
Mhm.
And she came in, made bad choices.
Whirlwind. She
It was like,
came in
and we were
like
all trying to
a
be so
force.
nice to
Oh,
her and so
yeah.
welcoming to her because sometimes in the midwifery community, you can feel like it's a little cliquey.
Ostracized,
Like it's a little
cliquey,
cliquey.
distrustful. But no, and I remember Sherry threw a big party for this woman, and all of the midwives in the valley were at your house.
Yes.
And it was a big deal. But yes, what Sherry said is 100% right. This woman single-handedly
Did a lot of damage. She had her
damaged.
certification.
Oh yes, but which comes back
Which
to what I was saying.
sometimes-
CPM.
Sometimes makes you think that.
And I attended several
Do you
births with
think
this
God
woman.
complex could show up a little bit?
Absolutely.
With those letters doctrine?
Absolutely. I've been with midwives who I know better. No, I don't really think you do.
I think you can let that go to your head. As a care provider, when somebody makes you feel like you have a moment where you feel worthy or I don't know, like it feeds like an
It's
unhealthy
an ego.
belief system.
It's an ego thing. It feeds your
Mhm.
ego. Like, here for me, like,
I'm the smartest in the room, right? That's Hamilton. That's my favorite song. When Aaron Burr sang.
I've never
seen it either. I
Hamilton.
feel so good about you saying
Oh
that.
my gosh.
Oh
I
my
have not
gosh.
seen. Oh,
But in it, Aaron Burr's character sings about why do you always have to be the smartest person in the room? And that is true. Like they'd get in these big think tanks and they would feel like they had to be the smartest person in the room in order to be relevant, in order to be heard, in order to be seen. And so do we still have to do that? Is that still like this primal trait that lives
It's
there?
almost like I'm going to show my nerdiness, my Big Bang Theory. That's like the Sheldon Cooper in all of us. Like we want to be the smartest person in the room.
We want to at least feel relevant or valuable or worthwhile.
But I tell clients all the time, I'm
Yeah.
like, especially when they're consulting and they're asking these questions, what's the difference between a DEM and a CPM? And I go, it's a test that we take. It's about the test that we take. And you could have a CPM and really worried about this word certified. That's the big buzzword.
You
certified,
feel-
right?
Do you feel any shame surrounding the fact that you're not? Like, do you, in your brain, do you go, I'm just this?
Yeah, absolutely.
I used to. That's when I was saying I was suffering from imposter syndrome, especially since the two women who I came up with they passed their test first out. And that was a lot of pressure on me. So yeah, for a really long time, I struggled with that. I don't anymore.
Yeah.
I can really say with a full heart right now, I do not need that CPM certification to feel like a valued, worthy midwife. I think that's a big thing. Like my clients, for the most part, rehire me. Now, I've had a couple of clients who have used me for one baby, gone to another midwife for another baby, come back to me for another baby, and they bounce around because they're looking for different experiences, which is awesome. But usually women, when they find their person, like Sherry was saying last time how a client of hers had called her. She was going through a really tough thing personally, and she
Not
hadn't
birth
seen
related,
Sherry,
yeah.
not birth related, but she hadn't seen Sherry in years. But Sherry was her safe space. I have a couple of former clients like that also, me being real here. I don't like it when people come to my house. I don't like when people come to my house.
Go to Eric.
Don't go to Erica's
I'm
house.
gonna show up
Well,
at your house tomorrow.
Sherry's been to my house. I live like a glorified college student. Like I've got animals. I have dust bunnies that I name. Like my house probably needs to be vacuumed every other day. But I do have one particular client who does come to my house.
Yeah.
And that's because there's a level of trust there. And I know from her there is no judgment. So I think the other thing is this fear of judgment. You like, oh, did this person really like me? Why did they hire me? Because I do still go through that. I'll be sitting with a client in the prenatal and I'll be like, why did they hire me? Did they even really like me? And this could be in the middle of a prenatal and it'll hit me.
But I love that you've gotten to a place where you're not feeling shame. And I thought we brought that up a little bit last time, but I still sometimes feel apologetic. And I said this year, I don't want to feel apologetic. I don't always assume I'm the smartest person in the room.
I never assume I'm the smartest person.
I feel like I hold myself here. So sometimes when I'm like explaining what I do for a living, I feel a little shame shows up for me a little bit, like just because I'm projecting because I think that they don't value what I do, right?
I think it's that when I'm talking to people about what I'm working toward, there's always this excitement about it because for me it's new, right? I'm 2 years in and I'm really digging this space. But I think the imposter syndrome where I'm like, are these letters going to make me feel better is because I am still just 2 years in and I'm still learning so much. And you said to me the other day, you'll always be learning.
Yes.
You'll always be learning. So whatever you're feeling is this right now. And you have to go through this experience to learn what you're supposed to learn out of it. So yeah, there's these moments where I'm like, okay, once I get the CPM, I'll be okay. But I know that once I get the CPM, I'm still going to be like, oh shit, like I know enough to do what I'm doing. That's what I tell clients now because they're like, what's the difference between DEM and CPM? And I'm like, it's a test, but you could have a DEM who's been practicing for 10 years. And then you have a CPM who the program takes 2.5 years, maybe, right? At the least. And they could have worked with 1 or 2 families. So it can be about
if you're hiring
experience
someone
and
based on a certification,
that
that person is
loop.
always going to hire the person with the initials after their name. And I found that out during COVID. I remember specifically a couple who came to me and I referred them to a different midwife. I knew right away I was not the person for them, and I referred them to a different midwife. And the husband kept asking me about certification. And
that is important.
I said, obviously, that is really important to you. Let me give you the name of a midwife who I think will really serve you well. So I did. I gave them the name of another midwife. I had heard that they hired her. The other thing he had asked me is, if we transport, do we get a refund? No. I also heard that they transported, and I'm wondering if they asked that midwife for a refund because that was another thing that was really important to him. But for this husband, which I thought was interesting, the pregnant woman did not care. But for him, it was all about those 3 letters after the name. And I'm like, if that's what you're about, I'm not your girl.
If you're a certified doula or not, the first question some people ask is, how many families have you worked with? How much experience do you have doing this thing? Yeah, like what experience do you have in the space that we're in this valley? Who do you know? What doctors have you worked with? What nurses do you know? Things like that. It's not about, are you certified through DONA? Like people don't even know what DONA is. Like when I talk about it, they're like,
and
oh,
what? One certifying body, a ton.
Yeah. So So I think it's
Yeah.
most about that experience. And as a student, that's what I would have the most of, which is
Yeah.
why when we talk about pathways, this is the route that I've chosen.
Right.
I've been to college.
We've been
No
there.
thanks. Thank you. And having this like on the job training where I get to be in it, like that's what serves me
Doing what
best.
you love. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think to close and wrap this up, I think what my take is on our conversation is, and I had a conversation with my daughter yesterday because she's trying to decide what she wants to do with her life. She's in her youth. And so what I told her is I said, go volunteer some places that you feel called to go volunteer at and learn a little bit about what you're getting into. So I would say, if you're interested in becoming a midwife, study the different pathways, look up the different organizations, but you know what? More importantly, find the community of birth workers and start going to births. That would be my 2 cents. If you're going to get called at 2 in the morning, how's that going to feel? If there's a negative outcome, how are you going to feel? Like you don't really know what you're getting into until you get into it.
How is your family going to handle you being gone for 12, 14, 18, 24 hours?
Yeah. What is your
Yeah.
childcare situation? Do you have a partner that's going to help? But go out and go to some births, go to hospital births, go to home births, go to all of them. Start as a doula. Start just offering to see what the work looks like because I think sometimes our profession gets romanticized.
Oh, 100%.
Because I'm like,
100%.
oh, you just get to catch babies all day. Oh, yeah. Okay. No, I catch a baby like once a week. But the work that goes behind it, you don't know until you start showing up. You start
Yeah.
showing up around the office. You start showing up with what the back of house stuff looks like, what charting looks like. And do you really want to do this? And I think keeping it out of the 4-year college situation is so nice because you could go get a taste of this before you committed. Like how many of us went to college going, this is what I'm going to do. And then you go,
I don't think so.
that
Our
isn't
English
as much
degrees.
as I wanted to do. So now I'm going to go this way. And with midwifery, the education you're getting is good for your own life, right? Being aware of your own body and the dynamics and the physiology and so that's what I would say in wrapping it up. I would say overall, I think go attend some births, start talking to midwives, and don't keep it to one. Talk to several midwives in your community. Talk to several birth workers.
See who's open also to having you come and shadow them.
I'm
Like-
considering this as an option. I would love to come shadow and then do work to trade for that or whatever, like massage backs, get food. But if you have any questions, post those questions down below so that if we didn't address different pathways or you wanted to know more about a specific pathway, we actually know a lot about the pathways, but it's just a lot to cover in one conversation. So we may revisit this again, but overall, I would say that's our wrap
We're
up.
wrapping it up.
Is there a way to wrap it
Yeah,
up?
we do. We talk about where to find.
We didn't write
the
anything
podcast.
down about that.
We did. We talk about where to find the podcast, and
So right now you
on
can
this
find
one.
us on Spotify and YouTube.
I'm just getting it in my head. You
do.
can do it. No, you can do it.
Okay.
So thank you guys so much for watching and listening. You can find the Delivered podcast on YouTube and Spotify, and we love having you guys. Thanks for watching us.